Wendy Addison is with us. It's been a little while since we last got together here in our Humana studio, Wendy. But this is a lot more convenient. You sitting in front of your computer over in the cold north, I guess you could call it. You've been keeping yourself pretty occupied and very involved in South African affairs. Just for those who don't remember, Wendy was the original whistleblower. Back at LeisureNet, she went through some very difficult personal times as a consequence of blowing the whistle there. But she's come through it very strong and has dedicated her life to helping other whistleblowers make their statements and indeed to go forward. Just briefly, Wendy, speak up, your organization. What does it do?
It's multi-pronged. First of all, hello, Alec. It's great to be back on your show again. And thank you for giving me this platform. So SpeakOut SpeakUp, yes, you're right, came out of my experience as a whistleblower. And it sort of grafted off into understanding all the legal imperatives around an organization's duty to listen up to people disclosing information in the public interest. So I've gone on to be an expert with the Council of Europe. I work around Europe in terms of training judges, lawyers, organizations, and how to actually progress a disclosure. And sometimes it takes a lot of mediation. The other part of it is I was sponsored to go to Stanford. And through that sponsorship, I learned a really neat social psych module called Courageous Conversations. So it really is based on my advocacy, I would say, in terms of promoting and empowering individuals how to speak up, how to listen up before you go down the whistleblowing route. So how do you have a courageous conversation, a generative dialogue, a constructive dialogue, a discourse in ethics, whatever you want to call it? I call it courageous conversations. And so my advocacy is really, let's get ahead of the whistleblowing, because whistleblowing is always second best. So there's a bunch of training around that. And my story is a salient story around what happens to a whistleblower, but also what could happen to an organization, the risks involved there too.
And we certainly are seeing that now with Old Mutual. It's almost like this massive edifice, hundreds of years old, is imploding. The social media attacks have been coming from all over the place. And now you have also entered the fray. Just explain how those whistleblowers from Old Mutual found you and what they told you.
Actually, it's a really lovely circular story, Alec, because they listened to my interview with you in Hermanus in March 2023. And they were in what I call the spin dry of whistleblowing at that stage. They'd blown the whistle back in 2020. One of them had been fired already. They were being sent all sorts of legal notices against them to stop harassing the investigation panel for outcomes around their whistleblowing disclosures. So they picked up their computers, they emailed me and said, can you help steer us? And could you influence some kind of agency over Old Mutual to help us get our message right and for Old Mutual to act on that message? And so because I sit on the advisory board of the International Whistleblowing Research Network, I pulled in very, very significant empowered agencies around the world to join me in an initiative of communication and correspondence with the CEO of Old Mutual to put ourselves at his disposal and saying, we're a bunch of experts, let us help you get this right. And that came also after a very meticulous due diligence that I did in terms of the disclosures and the procedural traveling or the journey around the procedural legal ramifications in terms of the whistleblowers and the organization itself.
Okay, but what did they tell you? What is going wrong, or what was going wrong? What are they so upset about?
Okay, so their disclosures are in the public interest, and their primary disclosure is that wealth managers within AdviceWorks, which is a subsidiary of Old Mutual, were being incentivized, I think possibly still are being incentivized, I'm not 100% certain, to actually promote their own products, the products of Old Mutual and AdviceWorks, against any other products. Now, this is against the FAIZ Act, one of the acts of the financial intermediary in South Africa. So it's not only illegitimate, it's actually illegal in terms of what they were doing or are doing. And so both of these individuals are determined to bring this to the attention of the senior executive team. Both of these individuals are senior executives themselves in the financial industry. And I also want to point out here that no matter what the disclosure was, if they disclose it, if any whistleblower discloses with good faith, there's a legal imperative for the organization to investigate and to communicate with the whistleblowers the state and status of that investigation. So that's where it all began. The detriments, the occupational detriments that these two individuals have suffered is phenomenal. The lack of due process by Old Mutual is I've never ever seen such bad due process for an organization of this significance in South Africa or in the world, to be quite honest.
Just explain that. When you say bad due process, what exactly does that mean? And perhaps give an example.
Yeah, so one of the most outstanding and alarming examples I can share is that when these individuals who initially reported directly into the senior executive board with their disclosures, it was acknowledged by the board that, yes, indeed, this would be under the PDA in South Africa, Protectors Disclosures Act. So they would be recognized as whistleblowers and they would be protected under the law. Nothing happened. So then they both, at different times, went and disclosed information to the Group Forensic Service, which is the internal whistleblowing mechanism within Old Mutual. The Group Forensic Services articulated back to them that this wasn't in their remit and they should go outside to get legal counsel. So the two whistleblowers then spent over millions of rands to get legal counsel at that point. But the most outstanding and alarming part of this is they then attempted to report their disclosures externally via the Deloitte's email address that it was on the public-facing website of Old Mutual. Old Mutual calls this the Mardili Charter. I think that's what it's called, Mardili Charter. It was on their website, and these two individuals used the email address to fire off their disclosures. And guess what happened? The emails bounced back. The email address was erroneous and didn't work. So this is at the heart of mechanisms for whistleblowers. And right at the get-go, they have got bounced emails coming back from Deloitte, who are the external reporting mechanism for whistleblowers at Old Mutual. And furthermore, when I pointed this out to the CEO of Old Mutual, and again, in a very diplomatic, helpful way, he said, well, that doesn't really matter because it was only on the website. What really matters is that we got it right on the intranet of Old Mutual. And I beg to differ because Old Mutual has shareholders like BlackRock that will be observing this. If you can't get your external messaging right on your website, what on earth is going on inside Old Mutual to support and protect whistleblowers? So that's just giving you one example, and that's at the get-go.
So what's happened to the whistleblowers? Where are they at the moment?
Both of them do not work for Old Mutual or any of the subsidiaries. the one got fired and was labeled a bad leaver. So again, we see this is common narrative for a whistleblower. This is an occupational detriment as well, to label someone as a bad leaver. The other whistleblower has successfully mediated a divorce agreement with Old Mutual. But none of this speaks to the brutality of the crushing of the messages of these whistleblowers, what they've had to go through as individuals, as human beings, the suffering within their families, the constant threat and actualization of receiving harassment orders from Old Mutual to threaten them not to contact Old Mutual's investigative panel when they didn't hear anything from the panel itself. So again, it very much demonstrates the power disparity. We know Old Mutual as a massive power, a significant power in South Africa. And they've utilized their power in the most aggressive way possible. And so we're still waiting to hear the outcome from the FSCA. And the fact that the FSCA has picked this up and is investigating adds the salience and the gravity of these disclosures.
From what I understand, what's in the public domain, it's to do with inducement for people to move their funds across to Old Mutual. And it doesn't, in a way, it doesn't come as a huge shock, because Old Mutual's performance has been shocking, very, very poor. They have a huge portfolios, and when you don't perform well, clearly you're going to lose those portfolios. So although it surprises one that they would be so blatant, the fact that whistleblowers are saying that this occurred would certainly suggest to senior management or top management, hey, we're going to have to fix something up here, or no, that's the way we do things here, shut up, whistleblower. That's what an external party would conclude after seeing this whole story. Am I on the right track here, or am I making, perhaps not joining the dots correctly?
No, I think you're right. I think, organizations like Old Mutual are like the Titanic. They're very big, powerful, and difficult to move. Very difficult to change direction for an organization like Old Mutual. I think individually, and some of the correspondence that I've had with the CEO of Old Mutual signaled to me that perhaps individually there's a really good bunch of leaders there at Old Mutual. I think where they got it wrong is this knee-jerk reaction to close down communication, to close down the intervention and open-hearted offer of help to help Old Mutual get this right. And so because this is in the public interest, and because this is about money, and because this is about people's future and their financial and economic future, it really does matter what Old Mutual does next. Like any whistleblowing scenario, I believe it's always helpful to find a dignified off-ramp for all parties. And that includes the whistleblowers and Old Mutual itself and all of its subsidiaries. I hope that we can get to some kind of gracious, dignified off-ramp here, where unethical behavior is stopped and changed, and they embrace the opportunity to do better in future. But at the moment, it really is about Old Mutual seems to be running around putting out fires and not engaging with the offer of help.
Well, living in the UK as you do, you would have seen the massive fines that the authorities there have levied onto financial services companies over a period of many years. In South Africa, we haven't seen that yet, but it's a little naive to think that if they were operating like that in the UK, that they weren't operating in a similar way in South Africa. So I suppose from a broader perspective, if the Financial Services Conduct Authority, the FSCA, gets involved, you might start thinking that the trouble's only just begun for Old Mutual. Was there much in the in what you saw from the whistleblowers which suggests this could be the case?
No. So their focus has purely been in a South African context. But I would imagine if this is a cultural sort of climate of Old Mutual, there could be spillover to international offices of Old Mutual, wherever they might be. If this is a endemic behavior of Old Mutual, we're sure to see it pop up somewhere here. And I also think this could be a watershed case in South Africa, particularly because the FSCA in South Africa have picked it up and are investigating. As I said, it gives it gravity, it gives it meaning, it makes it significant. And whatever comes out of this, I think, might and hopefully change the way that organizations in South Africa look at whistleblowing and whistleblowers in future. I think it's important to get it right. What we're seeing in America, it's very interesting. So you know that America has a reward system for whistleblowers. And we've got, what we're seeing is a bunch of American whistleblowing lawyers maneuvering around in Europe and the UK because organizations in America are getting their whistleblowing right. The way that they're responding to whistleblowers in the organizations is actually writing itself. And so there are less whistleblowers that are reporting externally, which mean less rewards for lawyers. So it's very interesting to see that unfold in America, whereas I think South Africa's still very much at the beginning of this. And I think whatever comes out of the FSCA investigation and what penalties they put on Old Mutual or Advice Works will be very interesting and influential on how things happen, how things unfold in South Africa thereafter.
Wendy Addison is from SpeakOut SpeakUp, and I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.